Welcome to the Working with Subject Matter Experts podcast. If you're responsible for keeping your business profitable into the future, you need to be managing your corporate knowledge to develop, manufacture, and deliver your best products and services. Here at the Working with Subject Matter Experts podcast, we talk about managing organizational knowledge to keep your business strong. I'm your co-host, Nathan Eckel, and it's great to have our host, Peggy Salvatore, with us. Peggy, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, Nathan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just peachy and groovy, and we have another opportunity to talk about really our favorite subject. We might be the only two people on the planet, but we just love this idea of getting these brilliant people and being able to harvest all of their know-how out of their heads before they retire. Peggy, what do you have to say about this?
I think you're right. You know, we do sometimes feel like we're the only two people on the planet who are such nerds about this. But did you find when we get out there and start talking to people, rooms full of people light up about this subject? This is a big topic.
And it's an expensive topic as well. So we're really here to help all of you. If you're a CEO and you're driving in your car right now, or if you're in a board of executives, or even if you're in the trenches as a designer or as a subject matter expert yourself, we're going to be sharing some tips and tools and some ways to relate, because we need to raise up the level of efficiency so that everybody prospers and everybody benefits.
Absolutely. And I think raising awareness is our first job. You know, people know they have a problem, but they haven't really named it until they talk to us and they light up and say, yes, that's exactly the problem I have.
Yeah, it's fun.
And then we try to do, you know, what the best consultants do, which is not only name the problem, but then we go in and try to solve it.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yep, that's why we're here. And that's why you wrote your books, Working with Subject Matter Experts, and then your second one, Finding Your Subject Matter Experts. So we're going to talk today about 4 questions that you pose in your book. You have 4 unanswered questions. This is in the introduction to your book, right there in page 12. And let's just jump right into that. What do you mean by the 4 unanswered questions? Are you talking about the meaning of life, or are you talking about your last book, or what are you talking about here, Peggy?
I'm talking about what happened between the first book and the second book. I wrote a first book called Working with Subject Matter Experts, and it was a methodology for how to gather information from experts and put it into training programs, or just otherwise pass it on in a pretty logical and codified way to for newer employees. After I wrote that book and started talking to people, I realized businesses had an even bigger problem than that. And their bigger problem was they weren't sure they were talking to the right experts. And then they weren't sure how that knowledge was really fitting into their business plans going forward. And these were huge issues that had everything to do with the survival of their business. It had everything to do with imagining how they were going to be profitable in the future. And with businesses and technology and everything changing so much, people are talking about this being a 4th industrial revolution. In which case, the knowledge we've captured and the knowledge we need in the future are huge questions to be answered. So once we started talking about it, I realized we had 4 unanswered questions in the first book.
So that's great. So just to recap all of that, you wrote the first book like all of us do. When we write the first book, for about a week afterwards, we think that we answered the question and finished the job, and this is going to be the standalone book. And then you realized there were 4 questions that you had just came into your awareness that the first book allowed to be answered in the second book. So let's just do this. Let's break it down. I mean, we're already about 5 minutes into the podcast right now. We try to keep these to about 10, 15 minutes. So we're just going to dive into the first one. So I'll just read off the first of 4, and that is that are we talking to the right subject matter experts? Why is that an important first unanswered question, Peggy?
Absolutely. Well, we found that people were talking to experts. Were they really experts? Was it really the information that you needed to capture for business continuity, for what you were going to need in the future. And a lot of that had to do with the sort of strategic thinking that was going on in the C-suite, what was happening in boards of directors. How are they imagining the future of this company? Are we talking to the right people? We don't need to be preserving expertise that becomes outdated. So a big piece of using your valuable, finite corporate resources in your training departments is to make sure you're spending it on information that you are going to need in the future. So the first question was, are we talking to the right people? And in order to be able to do that, we had to be able to think about where the business was going.
So note for the executives who are listening to this, if you're an executive, that means that you might be talking to the wrong subject matter experts. So just keep that in mind. We're doing this to save you money. Make sure you are talking to the right subject matter experts. Make sure if you're smart, you've already got an onboarding program. I'm just going to throw this in here, Peggy. You got to already have an onboarding program so that your designers and your subject matter experts can work together as well as possible. That's something we'll get into in the future, but just make sure you're talking to the right subject matter experts. So that was question number one. The second unanswered question is this: what knowledge should organizations capture? Tell us a little bit more about that question, Peggy.
I will, because it really segues from the last, which is having that big picture of your organization in the future and where it's going to make sure that you're capturing what you're going to need in the future. So how do you know what knowledge needs to be captured in your organization? Well, I've come up with a series of questions. I think of them as filters that you can use to analyze what are your competitive advantages today, and where do you see your industry going, and how do you envision those competitive advantages to possibly change in the future? A lot of it has to do with knowing your customer, because your customers are really the canary in the coal mine, as you know. So in terms of what knowledge should organizations capture, I think they know that, but they can find out by running it through a series of filters that I've developed, and a methodology basically for determining that individually within your own company.
And I'm just going to jump in and say, get Peggy's book. If you want to save a lot of money, get the book. And what the filters are found in chapter 4 through 6 of this book. It's amazing what Peggy has done, because she's come up with very precise filters that you can use to make sure that you are identifying the right kind of knowledge to capture. So let's review here. The first question was, are we talking to the right subject matter experts? The second question was, what knowledge should we capture as an organization? Question number 3 here, what knowledge needs to be captured immediately as opposed to eventually? So it's a timing question. So there's a ticking time bomb on some of these subject matter experts. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think part of what I mean by that is, first of all, who's leaving? Who could you potentially lose in the next weeks or months, where once that person has walked out the door and retired, you may not get them back. Or if you do get them back, you will get them back at a very high price. As an outside consultant, they'll come back and tell you what you need to know, but it's going to cost you. So immediately, as opposed to eventually, one of the first things you need to think about is who's leaving and how soon are they leaving. I had one client who literally sent me an email and said, "You won't believe what I'm doing today." He was a trainer in a manufacturing division of a steel fabrication plant. He said, "I'm on the floor with a guy who's retiring tomorrow, who has been running this machine for, 15 or 20 years. Nobody bothered to write down what he does. I'm out on the plant floor right now with my iPhone taking pictures of this guy." This is not the way you want to run it, okay? And this is happening in global corporations. So, if you think you don't have the problem, think again, because a lot of people I'm talking to are global corporations, and they are reporting these kinds of issues.
Absolutely. So those of you, you're in your car, you're at the gym right now, you're an executive, you're a CEO, you're a CLO, you're a CTO, COO, and anything with an O in your title. Listen to this, because the folks are leaving, and we're not even talking. Peggy, something that we haven't even raised before is the life factor. I mean, life happens. Meaning, God forbid, but it happens. People get sick. People have accidents. Life happens. So if this isn't already being part of the onboarding culture in your company, if you're not getting this stuff, if you're not setting the expectation in the interview process with some of these experts, oh my gosh, it's very retroactive and it's very expensive on the back end. But the most expensive thing of all is for them to walk out the door and then basically come back as a consultant, which happens all the time. Actually, that's not the worst. There's something worse than that, which is you just lose the knowledge, and it's expensive knowledge. So we're going to talk about this issue further on in the podcast. I just want to keep tying this back to daily life for all of us. So here we go. So we've got one question remaining. The first question, just to recap, are we talking to the right subject matter experts? Second question, what knowledge should organizations capture? Third question, it's a timing question. What knowledge needs to be captured now as opposed to eventually? And number 4, and finally, if we have limited resources or limited time, which experts are most important to speak with first? Peggy, over to you.
Absolutely. Well, part of it goes to the timing of retirements that you know about, because you really can't plan for the unknowable. In fact, if you don't mind my going back for a second, we talk about life happens. We used to call this, what if you got hit by a bus syndrome? But we decided that's too depressing and dark. So I now call it the what if your top worker won the lottery and left for Hawaii tomorrow and you never saw them again. So it's now the Hawaiian lottery ticket scenario. So yeah, what happens? So it's a matter of planning for the retirements you know are going to happen. But if you have limited resources and limited time, and quite frankly, if you're a business person, you're listening to this call, you have limited resources and you have limited time. We only have 168 hours a week. We only have the resources that we have at our disposal. We have to use them wisely. So how do you know who to speak with first? That's really where you go through the filters and the analysis of what your competitive advantages are as a business. What's the most important reason your customers come to you? You need to isolate that. You need to take that apart. And that's where you need to be first, because that's what's most important to preserve.
Great. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'm just going to spell it out for you. The reason that this works, you're probably noticing this is really lean, a lean conversation. And it's lean from every angle. It's lean from a timing angle, a finance angle, a energy angle. It's lean all the way around. And we're basically introducing lean right back into the conversation so that we can help you save as much money as you possibly can, help you run on time, help you have the least amount of distortion and disruption in your business. And again, just stay tuned with us here in the Working with Subject Matter Experts podcast, because we're going to keep investigating and talking and discussing about all of this stuff. So just to recap, I'm going to read all 4 of these questions again. If you didn't remember them already, I'm going to read them again, and then we're going to go back to Peggy for the final word. So first question, are we talking to the right subject matter expert? Second question, what knowledge should we capture as an organization? Number 3, what knowledge needs to be captured now as opposed to later? Number 4, if we have limited resources or limited time, which experts are most important to talk with first? Peggy, final word, over to you.
Wow, thank you so much. And my final word, I'm going to talk about lean, because I'm so glad you brought it up. I know it's a magic word in business these days, and I've studied lean. I'm going to say that I'm not certified to practice lean as a lean practitioner, but I've studied it. I've studied it in graduate school, and I've worked intensely with a couple of different organizations. So there is a lean thinking behind what I do. And I do bring that whole idea of getting to where the work is done and making sure that it's the people who are involved in the work who are really out front and able to have some agency in what they do. That makes them really valuable experts, and it helps them pass on their knowledge to other workers in your business. So yeah, I really thank you for bringing up lean. I think that's great. This is a sort of lean-based methodology. But yeah, thank you for your time. I really appreciate your working with me on this, Nathan. It's great fun to talk to you.
Well, it's fun to unlock the expert who unlocks the expert. So everybody, we'll see you on the next podcast. And in closing, I'm just going to review those 4 again, just because they're so critical. Are we talking to the right subject matter expert? What knowledge should we capture as an organization? What knowledge needs to be captured now instead of later? And if we have limited resources or limited time, which experts do we need to speak with first? Thank you for a lean approach to all of this, Peggy. And again, folks at home, if you're smart, you're going to buy this book, Finding Your SMEs, and you're going to apply it, because it's going to save you so much money, and it's going to help your leadership doing the results that you need to get taken care of as an expert and as an executive in your organization. We'll see you on the next one.